have quite a day for you. I have to say this right off the bat. I am tremendously excited that I get to do a monologue today. I don't do that a lot anymore. And oftentimes it's funny. You take for granted some of the things that you do every now and again. And I do appreciate the time that I get to have alone with you guys. It is such a blessing, and really excited to have the opportunity to do this. And guys, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. And folks, when I say a lot of stuff, I mean a lot of stuff. We are going to talk about the problem of Iran. And by the way, if you are struggling with understanding all of the geopolitics that lead to the problem that is Iran, I promise you, are going to get quite the education today. You are going to be really, really blessed. And I think that you are going to learn a lot, because we are going to talk about all of the ins and outs that a lot of people don't necessarily want to talk about, but we are going to talk about those things. And my hope and my prayer is that you will walk away with an enhanced knowledge, a little bit more of an enhanced knowledge of the things that are actually happening in the region, because it is uniquely critical for you to understand, okay? Very, very critical. And so my hope and my prayer is that you're going to be able to walk away with a lot of very good and useful information as we talk about a significant problem. By the way, Iran is not just a problem for Israel. Iran is a problem for the world. Iran is not just a problem for the United States. Iran is a problem for the world. And we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to explain why that's the issue. Although I do want to say this, it is really interesting. Iran continues to chant death to America. It certainly hates the Jews and seeks to destroy every Jewish life. Yet America seems to be the greatest enabler of Iran. And we're going to talk about why that's the case. It starts much earlier than what they did with the Yemeni Houthis, but we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Houthis because it makes a significant difference, and it's something that we need to have a conversation concerning. So all of this to say that there is a lot happening, and it's my hope and my prayer that you guys will be better at understanding all of this and perhaps recognizing what it is that is going on and why people think the way that they think. It is very important that you understand the Islamic world. You are never going to recognize the depth of the problem that we have unless you see that. So we're going to talk about all that. First, I do want to take a moment to thank you guys that are super chatting and doing super stickers. And here's the reason why I want to thank you for that. Because those of you that do that, you are helping us, because we regularly get demonetized. Especially when it comes to the subject of Israel and all of the things that we deal with and that we talk about on a regular basis. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you guys for your support and your love. You guys are absolutely awesome. Brad, it seems as though you've been first to the game quite a bit. And I want to thank you for that. You said this. You said Jesus said that we are to be a vessel for his light to shine. A light is brightest when it is darkest. It is dark now. Shine the light and be one God uses to make a difference. Matthew 5:16. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. You took the words right out of my mouth. I am grateful for that. Dale, thank you. If you were a snake, you would have bit me. I didn't even see you walk in. Thank you, bro. Okay, thank you. You're awesome. Speaking of Dale, by the way, we're going to have a great session, a great local session afterwards, and we got some great things planned for you in that local session. I'm going to show you a few videos that, oh man, I think are going to make you sick. But there's some encouraging thoughts to go with that in that process, and we'll have a conversation. Now, I want to make myself very clear before we start this conversation, because we have to go over a few news stories in order for you to understand the premise by which we're approaching the issue. One is going to be a story that was released on the Daily Wire that deals specifically with ballistic missiles being fired at, yes, a United States destroyer. Okay? There is an attempt being made, or was an attempt that was made and continues to be attempts made upon our troops and our people, and yet we don't see a lot being spoken of in this particular situation in the media. By the way, that is a particular disgrace. It is something in my mind and in my heart that is absolutely reprehensible. There is no reason in the world why these things should be not spoken about in the media, but the media seems to, especially Western media, seems to hate the United States of America, and the ones that seem to hate the United States more than any other group are the American media group. And we'll talk about that for just a second, because they are contributing in substantial ways to the destruction of the republic in which we're seeing, and it means something because we have always been the gatekeepers to freedom. And I think that this is an important thing for us to be able to understand. Now, I want you guys to know something, okay? This is critical. This is very, very important. You need to know that what we are seeing with Islam is not just something that is localized to a region 8,000 miles away, okay? A lot of people tend to think Israel doesn't affect me because it's thousands of miles away. A lot of people think Egypt doesn't affect me because it's thousands of miles away. They say that all over the Middle Eastern world, no matter what happens there, we are not going to be affected. And the reason why is because we are separated by distance. But there's a huge problem with that statement. And that is the fact that the current administration, let's just call them regime, that is controlling office in the United States of America has already opened the Pandora's box for people coming across the border and, in essence, destroying, in the name of Allah and jihad, the lives of American citizens. There are tons of sleepers that are in this country, and they are ready to do what they are doing, as they would say in Islam, bi'isma Allah, in the name of Allah. By the way, don't let anybody deceive you. Allah is not a general term for God. It is not a title. Allah is a name that is connotative of a very specific individual. I think that's very important to point out. The level of brainwashing that is going on is significant in that the devil is the father of lies, and he continues to take these lies and communicate them in ways that cause people to personalize them to the point that they go to radical extremes to defend a cause that they have no understanding of. And I think that this is very important. As a matter of fact, I would like to start with a few videos for you to see that will help better demonstrate the point that I am bringing up. And by the way, it is important, it is critical that you understand where this is coming from and why this is as important as it is. You need to understand that the reason why we continue to contend for these issues centers around the fact that so many people do not understand what is going on across the globe and have no real understanding of the issues that center the many problems that we continue to face. Here's an example. I'm going to play the audio of this. Actually, no, I'm actually going to play a video of this. Now, this is interesting because this is the Emiratis Minister of Foreign Affairs who makes a comment concerning the problem of what's happening in Europe. By the way, we should start with this, because if we start with this, then we'll better understand the fact that when we speak about Islamic jihad, when we speak about what the Quran says concerning what Allah desires for those that are in Islam, when we speak about Muslims, when we talk about the idea and the world of Islam, you have to understand that what it entails is the destruction of anybody who is not willing to submit to the words of Allah. This is a very, very important issue. And many of the people who are fundamentalists, anybody in essence who is a fundamentalist of Islam, will take it to the extreme. We have to remember this. There's a context for this. So let's watch this, because this will serve a very important purpose, one that I think cannot be missed. Listen to what the Emiratis' Minister of Foreign Affairs says, and it is profoundly true. Profoundly true. Listen to what he says. This is an important one, okay? Let's take a listen at what he actually says here.
أو أن تتحمل مسؤوليتها.
By the way, he starts speaking in Arabic and immediately decides he's going to go into speaking English here, okay? So that's very important. I want you guys to see this. It's critical, okay? Take a listen.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
He is 100% right. And when he talks about the lack of decision-making, what he's actually referring to, and let me help you guys better understand this, when he speaks of the lack of decision-making, he is talking about the absence of the will to eliminate the problem of the type of insanity that we see Islam allowing and making way for people to follow. And the hypocrisy that follows that world is extreme. Absolutely extreme, especially when people make representations about matters that they absolutely do not understand. They do not understand. And yet Israel continues to be targeted on a regular basis. They continue to target Israel on a regular basis without any foundation for why they do what they do. This is an interesting speech that I'll play a portion of. I think it's worthwhile. This is Halal Noor. He's speaking to the United Nations. I believe this is a United Nations address. And what he says here is very, very interesting. Very interesting. He is part of an organization called UN Watch. And what he says here is staggeringly critical for us to be able to understand. So let's get into this discussion. And then I'm going to play another video for you that I'm telling you right now is going to astound you after we go over some of the stories that we're going to go over. As I said before, this is an interesting one, and if you've not seen it, you need to. You're going to watch it right now. This is unbelievable. Let's watch this.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs, whatever challenges they face, enjoy full rights to vote and to be elected in the Knesset. They work as doctors and lawyers. They serve on the Supreme Court. Now, I'd like to ask the members of that commissioned that report, the Arab states from which we just heard, Egypt, Iraq, and the others, how many Jews live in your countries? How many Jews lived in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco? Once upon a time, the Middle East was full of Jews. Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Algeria, where are your Jews? Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Syria, you had tens of thousands of Jews. Where are your Jews? Iraq, you had over 135,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Mr. President, where is the real apartheid? Why is there a UN commission on the Middle East that does not include Israel? From the 1960s and the 70s, they refused to include Israel. Where is the apartheid, Mr. President? Mr. President, why are we meeting today on an agenda item singling out only one state, the Jewish state, for targeting? Where is the apartheid, Mr. President?
Notice the silence in the room. Notice the lack of response. This is not a video effect, folks. There is silence in the room here. I think it is absolutely reprehensible, and might I say astounding, the fact that we continue to see and observe an environment where Jews continue to be targeted in ways that are substantial. You know, it's funny how they actually say that Palestinians are being murdered by Jews in a genocidal fashion. Yet, when Israel took back possession of the land that was given to them by God in 1948, in 67, and in 73, understand at the very beginning of this, the absolutely liberal, insane, crazy number is that there were about 500,000 Arabs that were living in that region. 500,000. In Gaza alone, there are 2.1 million to 3 million Jews. 2.1 to 3 million Jews. In Gaza alone, there's that many Jews. So when you say that there is something apartheid related or genocidal happening in Israel, if it is genocidal, then why is it that there is a growing population of Jews or of Arabs? Here's another question. How is it that the number of Jews is dropping in Arab countries all over the world? I understand that many of them are immigrating back to Israel because it's the only land that they feel safe in. And even then, there are problems associated with the land in that context. How about this? Here's another big one. How about we take it a step further, because this is important. This is critical for us to recognize and understand, okay? Because we're asking all of these questions, and these questions are critical, right? But I want everybody to understand, if the Arabs in Israel are increasing in population, more millionaire Arabs are being made in Israel than any other country outside of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. What's happening? Is there some kind of a conflicting message that's going on? This is ugly. And the lies continue to be communicated in ways that are so derogatory that you have to be completely ignorant of history and unaware of what's really happening in order to believe these lies. But that's what's going on. Did you know that the president of the largest bank in Israel, is an Arab, considered to be a Palestinian? Why is it that Israel is the only country that's willing to take in Palestinians, where all 22 Arab countries don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole? Explain that to me. Explain how that works. Yet we're so quick to throw out terms like genocide. We're so quick to throw out terms that are designed to grab the heartstrings of a person who might hear those words, but it's very obvious that so few people are aware of the facts. This is something that people do not understand. And the Islamic mindset and the Islamic philosophy that is being force-fed to them through Sharia law, based on many contradicting principles in the Quran, continue to communicate the lies that people are believing hook, line, and sinker. This is crazy if you think about it. And how about this? You want to talk about the kind of things that are crazy. How about the fact that besides Jews all over the world, one of the greatest persecuted groups are Christians? And amongst Christians who are being persecuted, why don't we talk about Armenia for a second? Why don't we talk about Armenians who are suffering even at the hands of those in Azerbaijan? No one really wants to talk about the hundreds of thousands, potentially hitting 1 million Armenians that have been brutally murdered. You want to talk about real genocide? It's happening right now. When you look at what's going on with Azerbaijan, which, by the way, interestingly enough, is a Shiite Muslim country, and not only a Shiite Muslim country, but one that happens to be close to Israel for some uniquely and distinct economically strategic reasons. That's a very complicated relationship, by the way. But why in the world do we not hear anything about the Armenians that are dying at a rapid, incredibly rapid pace? Why don't we talk about Arabs for just a second? How is it that some Arabs can get away with killing other ones and there's no discussion about any of this? No discussion about any of it. But yet, if there's even a hint that Israel wants to defend itself because of the brutal attacks made upon its own nation, then all of a sudden Israel is desiring to destroy the lives of Arabs. Folks, do you understand that under Sharia law, women cannot go to school? Do you understand that they are, in essence, producing illiterate women? Because their job in the Islamic mindset is to stay at home and to care for the children, which, by the way, don't get me wrong, I think the most admirable job that any woman can have is to stay at home and to care for her children. Because what they bring to the table is remarkable and brilliant. But I think about people like my wife, for example, who is a highly educated female, who has decided to walk away from her job so that she can homeschool our children. She has a postgraduate degree. She's a speech language pathologist. She's a clinician. And yet she has chosen to do the better thing. I think about my sister-in-law all of a sudden. She is a doctor, Kaddis. She's a brilliant woman. Absolutely gifted individual. The brain power in that woman alone is substantial. And yet she has decided to do the most honorable thing any woman can do. And that is continue to be one of the best homemakers out there, care for the family, love my nephews and nieces, raise them in the ways of the Lord. And every bit of talent and wisdom that God has given her is being poured into the children that she's raising up. I think about my own sister, who, yes, has a very, very, I think, amazing career. She does some things that a lot of people will never even be able to understand, will not be able to understand. But the thing that's interesting about that is, even with the career-oriented mind that my sister has, the one thing she recognizes based on the example given to her by my parents is the biblical obligation set forth in front of her to take care of the responsibilities that God has given her as a woman of God. So when we stop for a second and examine what Islam is bringing to the table for women, it's all about the oppression of women. There is nothing that it brings to the table of any great value for women. And when you have people who are going online and lying about matters that they don't even completely understand, like, I think it's really, really funny how you'll have a guy, forgive me for saying this, matter of fact, it's not even worthwhile mentioning a name, but how you'll have a guy who makes a career out of peddling the sex industry, but yet in the name of something that is honorable, chooses to go from Christianity to Islam because of the principles related to masculinity. He clearly doesn't understand Islam. The person I'm talking about is a very smart man. He's not a dummy. But the complexities that oftentimes come with the level of deception that the enemy brings into play takes advantage, oftentimes, of intellectual assent to come to the ridiculous conclusions that so many come to. The lies are clear and they're obvious, and Islam is destructive. I want people to understand it, and I want people to know it for what it is. Folks, make no mistake about it. When we look at the problem of Iran and when we look at the problem of many of these Arab nations, I need you to understand something very clearly. We'll speak about Iran specifically. The leaders of Iran are not doing what they're doing because they have some ideological philosophy that drives their actions with the hope that they can make a better life for the people that they are supposedly helping or leading or ministering to. Everything that they do is being ideologically driven by a text that is designed to deceive mankind. We saw exactly what the butcher of Tehran did in front of the United Nations. I should show you exactly what he did. If you look at his address to the United Nations as he's standing there, Ibrahim Raisi, he stands making an address to the United Nations, and in that address, as he's speaking to them, he holds up the Quran and he begins to tell people about the tool that it stands for, what it means. Let me give you an opportunity to watch him. I don't want to give him any ground here whatsoever or a platform that he does not deserve to have. But do not be deceived. Folks, let me just say something. Let me make myself clear. Do not be deceived by this man's mild appearance. Do not be deceived by his quiet disposition or the lying translator that is speaking words that are smoothing over the things that he is saying in Farsi. Understand, this man is a murderer. He is a liar, and he does it bi-isma Allah. He does it in the name of Allah. Make no mistake about it, he is doing exactly what the Quran tells him to do. And he uses Western terms that he does not apologize for using. He has no problem with the Western terminology that he continues to offer. Do you understand, you guys, that the type of things that he is talking about, he introduces a term, cultural apartheid. Those are Western terms that he's using. He's taking advantage of the ignorance in academia and the lies that continue to be spoken in order to affect a cause that further propagates the ignorance and the death culture that follows Iran. We have to understand this. This cannot be a matter that is void from our mind or our thinking or our thoughts. This is a critically important issue. Listen to what Raisi says here. It's going to be translated because he's addressing the UN. This is the 78th meeting of the United Nations, the 78th session, general session. You need to understand what he's doing here. Understand what he's carrying. And look what he does. Can I also make this? I want to make myself very clear. If you had Bibi Netanyahu stand before the United Nations with a Torah in his hand and speak about the mandates given by Almighty God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then kiss the Torah before he puts it down while speaking about the fact that his policy for Israel is being driven by the Torah, they would completely mow him down. He would never, ever, ever in a million years be given a pass for that in the international community. Yet this man is holding in his hand a document that encourages the active elimination of Jewish lives. It speaks of the fact that Allah is the greatest liar. He's the greatest deceiver. These are not exaggerations, folks. This is exactly what the Quran says. So when I show you this, don't be shocked when you see what he says and what he does. And he continues to be given a pass. So listen to what's being said here, because again, this is insane, but this is the world that we're living in right now. This is Iran. This is Islam. By the way, you know what they call him, by the way? They call this man right here the Butcher of Tehran. There's a reason why he has that title. He's a stone-cold, hardcore killer. Look what he says. The translator will chime in a minute.
These understandings that bring unity and divine teachings that inspire, that build human characters, that build societies, that build progress for human societies.
Notice he's holding the Quran in his hand. The same document that directs him to eliminate Jewish lives. The same document that continues to help him to propagate the lie that he is obligated by Allah, which he is obligated by Allah. Allah says it, to eliminate anybody who opposes Islam. It builds societies. It encourages character. Like October 7th. You understand, what we saw on October 7th was a direct result of this man's hand. People need to understand that. He gives this address. This is over a month before October 7th. They had been planning this with Hamas for 2 years. Understand, the Quran that he holds in his hand is the very tool that motivates him to the action of the elimination of not just the Jewish state, but of Jews. And they continue to chant, "Death to America." Continue. Listen to what he continues to say as he's holding up a Quran in his hand. Can you imagine? Look, can you imagine if I'm going to reach over and grab this? If I held a Bible in my hand as a world leader and began to say, this is the document that serves as the only hope for society, which it is. This is the document right here that will help to build the character of mankind, which it is. This is the document that will build families instead of tear them down, which it is. Can you imagine what happens? Can you imagine where this is going to end up going? This is ridiculous. But folks, I'm going to say it again. This is Islam. And the world is open to it. Look what he continues to say. By the way, Mikey Sanchez, thank you, brother. Love you. Watch this.
Will never be burned. Is eternal. They remain impervious. The fires of disrespect will not overcome the truth, the divine truth.
The fires of disrespect will not overcome the truth, the divine truth, while he's kissing the Quran and putting it down. Do you believe that, folks? Listen to what he continues to say. I'll only give him another minute or two. Not even that. But listen to what he says.
Mr. President, Islamophobia and cultural apartheid witnessed in Western countries, evident in actions ranging from the desecration of the Holy Quran to the ban on hijab in schools.
Did you say what he's calling cultural apartheid? What he's calling Islamophobia? By not allowing women to cover their faces with the hijab in a public school, that this is the ultimate fire of disrespect, how they speak against the Quran? The reality of it is, when I speak about the Quran, I'm simply quoting what the Quran says, knowing full well that even in the Quran, it makes it very clear that Allah is the chief of liars. He's the chief of deceivers. That's what it says in the Quran. This is not a lie. I have lost count how many times I have read this to you. I've lost count how many times I've sat down to read these exact words. He's mentioning the Quran. He's talking about how holy it is. Let me read exactly from the Quran what it says. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَكَرِينَ. He's saying, the Quran is saying they deceived, referring to the Jews indirectly. So Allah deceived because Allah is the chief of deceivers. He says we're desecrating the holy book, but all I'm doing is simply quoting what he says is the holy book. Which, if you even look at the credibility of the document itself from a perspective of any level of textual criticism, you will recognize how broken the Quran actually is and how inconsistent it is. They talk about the fact that the Quran cannot be modified or moved. It's the word of Allah that can't be changed. Yet there are 700 versions of the Quran, 700 versions of the Quran, many of which contradict one another. Because of the absence of grammatical structures that oftentimes insinuate a specific context, not just for a matter of pronunciation for literary flow, it actually changes the context of meanings of specific words. And what do they do to fix the problem? They say, well, I'm going to pick this, this, and this, and this, with no understanding of the variations, no understanding of the inconsistencies, yet it is the holy word that cannot be moved or affected. You understand, the man is standing before the whole world lying, using Western terminology, the terminology that is being taught to our children in the school system, to continue to lie and not tell the truth. This is very, very important that we understand this. Very important. The devil is good at what he does. Ladies and gentlemen, the devil is a liar. And he is very good at his deception. Let me go back and play so that you have it in context. What he says is cultural apartheid. Okay? Let's go back. Let me just go back and play this for you. As he's kissing the Quran. It's disgusting.
Will not overcome the truth, the divine truth. Mr. President, Islamophobia and cultural apartheid witnessed in Western countries, evident in actions ranging from the desecration of the Holy Quran to the ban on hijab in schools and numerous other deplorable discriminations, are not worthy of human dignity. Even more concerning is that
by the way, when he says not worthy of human dignity, by the way, I'm going to switch out of here because he doesn't deserve a platform for his hate speech. Not worthy of human dignity is his way of saying that they need to be eliminated in ways that are not worthy of humane treatment. And isn't it amazing how he is using the adaptation of Western terminology that comes from the very place that he condemns and hates? So for the sake of communicating his lies, he is willing to introduce terminology to you, allowing it to come out of his mouth that has been propagated by the very people that he hates. Isn't that funny when you think about that? Isn't it funny when you think about the lies that continue to be propagated in a way? This is crazy. This is crazy. And if you were to stop for a moment to consider where all of this came from and how this was all put together, you will realize that the Quran in and of itself is not a reliable document. It is a document filled with deception, based on the premise of deception, built on the whole bed of deception, and the reliability that it claims to stipulate is completely broken. And if you go to the smartest of Islamic scholars and you speak to them to explain and ask them to explain these things, they will literally avoid the subject because they don't want to address those matters using intellectual assent, because their understanding of what is really happening, if they truly understand the truth, forces them to either acknowledge that what they have believed is a farce or to continue to be part of the propagation of the lies, which most of them continue to do. This is the problem that we have. Now, where does all of this translate? Well, let's hit the rewind button for just a second, and let's talk about what happened when the Biden regime came into office. The Biden regime made a massive mistake when it came to Mideast policy. By the way, the worst Mideast policy that I have ever seen in the history of the United States of America, believe it or not, was not Jimmy Carter. I thought for sure that Carter would have represented the worst amongst Mideast policy. Right? Maybe a close second would be Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. for that matter. Obama, of course, terrible Mideast policy. Absolutely terrible. Anti-Semitic policy. And a continuation of Obama's term, which of course is the current regime in office, continues to carry the propagation of a series of very hateful actions that are designed to destroy Jewish lives and the state of Israel. So we hit the backup. Biden comes into office and he makes a very clear declaration through his administration that they will no longer recognize the Yemeni Houthis as a terrorist organization. Now you would think it's just a formality. So when they go and they describe who terrorists are, if they don't want to call the Houthis a terrorist organization, then maybe they're just trying to make friends. First of all, I can't think of anybody in Yemen, unless they're Christians, that actually like Americans. So let's just throw that out. You're not going to make peace with people who believe that Allah is telling them to eliminate you. You're not going to make peace with them. But let's just put that aside for a second. This has nothing to do with them trying to win the favor over of the majority of Middle Eastern leaders or even the people. This is them seeking to destroy Israel and Saudi Arabia, for that matter. There's a deep disdain for the royal family and for Saudi Arabia, clearly exhibited through the actions of the United States of America. Not as deep of a disdain as they have, of course, for the Jews. That's a whole other story. The anti-Semitic bent that we continue to see demonstrated by what I believe is the worst president of the United States, the worst president the United States has ever had, is beyond my ability to even want to reason through. It doesn't even make sense. So what does he do? He declares the Houthis in Yemen to be, in essence, non-terrorists. Now, the problem that brings is, of course, when they are not recognized as a combatant group of people, and they are no longer terrorists under the definition for the United States of America, then that means there is a forced element that now exists within Saudi Arabia and anybody else who has purchased defense weapons from America. But for this matter, we're going to talk about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, for those of you that don't know, Yemen is to the southern border of Saudi Arabia. And one of the greatest problems that they're having right now are issues going on in the Dead Sea, which, by the way, the Red Sea, which is something we're going to talk about. But the bigger problem that they're dealing with right now is all of these things that are seeking to destabilize the region based on the actions of these known terrorists who are, of course, the second greatest proxy of Iran, only second to Hezbollah. So no, they're no longer enemy combatants. They can't be treated as enemy combatants. And so Saudi Arabia no longer can defend itself against the attacks of the Yemenis, the Yemeni Houthis. And some of you might say, well, no, that's not true, James. The rules of engagement allow any nation under any circumstance to defend itself when an act of aggression has taken place. Well, you're right. But there's also within the defense of a nation an anticipatory mechanism that continues to be relied upon to make determinations over the preeminence of an attack. And when they're able to make a determination that an attack might potentially take place, they can preeminently strike in order to protect their interests. Happens all the time, by the way. Nations all over the world do this, and they do this on a regular basis. They do this actually without any real repercussions, and on a regular basis, they are oftentimes supported in their preeminent actions. Because the anticipatory mechanism that's created by the surveillance systems that they have and the clandestine operators that continue to work for them feed them the information that make it a necessary item to act preeminently in order to defend the interests of the nation and the security. So this is very important that we understand this. As a matter of fact, one of the most attributable variables that exist within a lot of the casualties that were taken by Israelis in 1973 centers around the fact that Golda hesitated, even based on some of the intelligence that she had, because of the implications of the international effects that would have on them preeminently striking a target, even with the anticipation that such a target was justifiable in its attack because of what was going to happen. You have the intelligence, you have the knowledge, you have to do all those types of things. So this is very important that we understand what's going on. He declares Yemen to no longer be, or the Houthis to no longer be a terrorist organization, which means Saudi Arabia cannot defend itself because Saudi Arabia, guess what? Saudi Arabia has possession of American weapons that it is contracted with. Understand that. So what does Saudi Arabia do? Saudi Arabia goes to Russia and says, hey, listen, we're going to give you an overwhelming amount of our defense budget. We're going to buy your airplanes. We're going to buy your anti-aircraft missiles. We're going to buy all of your equipment because we need to be able to defend ourselves with the Houthis. Russia says, yeah, I'll make a great deal for you. They make a killing off of what Saudi Arabia buys from them. And Russia says, don't worry, I'll handle the Houthi problem. And what do? They contact Tehran. And they begin to build a coalition of a group of people who continue to kind of put a little bit of a leash on the Houthis. So the complexities that are associated with attacking a terrorist group like the Houthis are very much similar to what we're seeing with Hamas right now. Very important that we understand that. So let me read this. Here's the title of the article. I don't even have to get into the details, but I'll read a few paragraphs. It says, Iranian-backed terrorists fire ballistic missiles at U.S. destroyer. This is the Daily Wire. And here's what it says. Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists in Yemen fired 2 ballistic missiles at a U.S. destroyer in the Gulf of Aden just after midnight on Monday, after the vessel thwarted an attempt by terrorists to seize a tanker connected to an Israeli businessman. Yeah, by the way, that's what they're doing right now in the Red Sea. They're seeking to destroy these tankers that are owned by Israeli businessmen that are billionaires. The Gulf of Aden, by the way, for those of you that might not be completely aware of what that looks like, the Gulf of Aden is at the southern tip of Yemen. Okay, just so that you understand that, or the southern border of Yemen. The southern border of Yemen is a body of water. You go further east, you're in the Arabian Sea. You go further south, you're in the Indian Ocean. But if you go to the west, you're in the Gulf of Aden. If you keep going west, you're at the shore of Djibouti. Always have a kick out of talking about Djibouti for a second, right? Eritrea is to the north of that. Ethiopia sits behind it. Somalia is right next to it. You've got Kenya. You've got Uganda. You've got several different African nations, many of whom, by the way, are hostile towards Jewish interests. But that's beside the point. The complexities of examining that alone. Africa, by the way, let me just say this. Africa can be a very, very, very complex set of geopolitics that are very difficult for a lot of people to understand, because if you don't understand, there are certain variables that exist within Africa that if you don't understand, that you can't see behind, then you're going to have a big problem, right? I mean, I was just listening to somebody who was talking about the Canary Islands and actually trying to sound like they were fully aware of the problem or some of the problems represented by the proximity of the Canary Islands to Morocco or Western Sahara, so on and so forth. Mauritania, which is further south, but that's a whole other issue. It's amazing to hear people talking out of their rears, not really understanding what's going on and the complexities that exist as a result of the positions many of these nations are taking are extreme. I think of the issue of Western Sahara and what recently happened with Bibi, making the declaration about Morocco and Morocco's interest in Western Sahara. The complexities that come from a statement like that alone are significant. But Bibi did that in a very calculated way because he understood the implications of the normalization agreement that exists between Israel and Morocco and the economic implications of such a thing and the stability that it has the potential to bring, especially when you look at Mauritania, Algeria, and Tunisia. Very interesting how all of that works. It's just amazing stuff. By the way, a lot of that is kind of held at bay until we figure out what happens with Libya, okay? Because Tripoli, which is, you're talking, let me picture this in my head, opposite of where Benghazi is, you're talking about the northwestern corner of Libya, becomes a major issue in the civil war that's being fought right now. The start of which, by the way, was in a little tiny city called Benghazi, which we all know the story of that. What does it matter? Those of you that know. That's all I got to say. Those of you that know. Look what it goes on to say. The Liberian flag Central Park chemical tanker, which is managed by Zodiac Maritime, a UK-based firm that is part of Israeli billionaire Eyal Offer's Zodiac Group, was believed to have been seized earlier in the day. However, the USS Mason and associated aircraft received a distress call from the vessel that the crew was under attack. Upon arrival, the destroyer demanded that the crew be released, and the 5 terrorists who boarded the ship got back on their small boat and attempted to outrun U.S. forces, but quickly failed. At approximately, here's a quote, at approximately 0141 hours on November the 27th, Sanaa time, 2 ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen toward the general location of the USS Mason and the MV Central Park. This is the U.S. Central Command that's saying this, guys. The USS Mason, which is part of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, was concluding its response to the MV Central Park distress call. At the time of the missile launches, there was no damage or reported injuries from either vessel during this incident. The missiles did not reach the destroyer, and it is not clear if they were shot down. Don't know if they didn't reach it because they were shot down or not, but this is heavy stuff when you think about it, right? Look at what the U.S. CENTCOM commander says. Maritime domain security is essential to regional stability. We will continue to work with allies and partners to ensure the safety and security of international shipping lanes. Yeah, that's a massive bite to take. That's a huge issue. It's a big issue. So you have the Yemenis that are firing at the United States of America. Get that, folks. Those are American assets that they're firing. Think about the significance of that. The United States has an obligation, has an absolute obligation to respond to the Yemeni Houthis. Why aren't they using their MQ-9 Reaper drones? Why aren't we going out of our way to make sure that the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden are not acceptable places or comfortable places for any assets to be taken over? Why aren't we doing that? Is it because the administration is failing to anticipate a series of problems that could potentially arise by the presence of Islamically motivated individuals whose whole goal is to eliminate the Jewish state and all Jews, just as they want to eliminate America and all Americans? We have a problem on our hands, folks. By the way, if you still don't believe me and you don't think that we have a problem on our hands, I'm going to play another video for you. You can make what you want of the video, but listen to what this person says regarding Islam. Listen to what he says about what's happening in Europe right now. And tell me what the viability is of Islam being the primary motivator for the destruction of everything that is Western. I want you to take what I'm saying seriously. Folks, when people say they want to destroy your life, you should probably believe them. When people say they want to harm you, you should probably believe them. I think it's important that you believe them because they're not lying. Take a listen to this clip. This will blow your mind. Here we go.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good.
By the way, we're putting this in the hands of Allah. It's really what he's saying. He's saying God, but that's his English version of his lie. He's putting it in the hands of Allah for the consummation of Sharia law in Britain. By the way, and he says that freedom is bad. Freedom is bad in the UK. It's destructive in the UK. Think about that. Let me rewind it so you can hear it. He's not hiding. He's telling you his true feeling. He's telling you what he really believes. Listen to this. He really believes this nonsense. He believes this lie. Listen.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good for Afghanistan, and in fact, we need an alternative. Unlike man-made law, the Sharia is not something which gives you a right today to take it away tomorrow. It's good in all times and places.
Sir, to make this an issue of freedom and democracy is absurd. Anjem, you haven't had a hair on your body touched by this government or this country. You haven't spent a day in prison. You haven't suffered one bit for your views. You're allowed to sit here right now because of freedom and democracy. In your so-called caliphate, you'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me? Am I an apostate that deserves death?
Listen to his answer, okay? I'm going to go back and I'm going to repeat the question that he asks. Listen to how he answers this. This is amazing. If you guys can't believe this, I don't know what to say. You guys are an amazing audience. You believe this stuff. You know it. You're very well-educated people. But listen to this. Listen to what's being said here.
Under your caliphate, he would be executable, would he?
He will be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that...
He'll be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that... Folks, you understand? Do you understand the problem here? Do you understand the picture? For every video that I'm showing you, I have literally a million others that I can bring to the table. Millions an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. I have a lot more that I can bring to the table that effectively demonstrate this point. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it very clear. I think it's very important. I'm trying to make it clear that if we do not understand this for what it is, we're in trouble. Folks, look, it's no secret. Okay, the United States of America is already in deep poo-poo. Okay, this is not something that we have to, beat around the bush over. The United States of America is already in massive trouble. So let's not pretend as though something is not really happening. It is what it is, and we're in big trouble. Let's not fake. Let's not pretend. This is the reality. This is what Islam is about. And until we recognize the problem for what it is, we're not going to really understand the full implications of everything that are happening. Now, with all that said, understanding that Iran is a major problem, understanding that I think the desires of Satan are being effectively rendered through Iran, especially on the Jews, right? I want you to know this. I want you to know this. If we do not take a stand for truth and righteousness now, any even remote hope that you have for change or revival isn't going to happen. It starts by telling the truth. You tell people the truth, and then you trust that God will show up as the truth is being communicated. By the way, something you all should know. Yesterday, I had an amazing interview with Edo Netanyahu. If you don't know who Edo Netanyahu is, he is the brother of the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm going to release that interview on Friday. I want you guys to tell a lot of people about that interview because he is going to help very effectively articulate why the United States of America should be concerned with Iran. Why the United States of America should be concerned with what we're seeing with Hamas. Why the United States of America should be concerned with what we're seeing with Israel. God makes it clear. He's going to bless those that bless Israel. He's going to curse those that curse Israel. But there are so many variables that a lot of people don't consider. And I want you guys to be the best educated people that you could possibly be regarding all of these matters. I want you to be able to understand fully the implications of all that we're watching in the moment. I want you guys to sit as individuals who are fully aware of everything that's happening in front of you. This is serious stuff, you guys. We're not playing games here. We're not like, just messing around and slouching around. This is all about life and death. Very, very important. Okay, we're going to go over to locals. I'm going to show you a few other videos, by the way, on locals that are going to blow your mind. One of them is just going to make you sick. But I want to say this before we go over there. God is going to win. We know that. So the issue here for us isn't to do the things that we're doing because we want to win. We're doing the things that we do knowing that God has already won, but that God has called us to tell the truth, and that's why we do the things that we do. And that's why you all should be engaging in the war and in the battle that you are engaged in, because it is one that is 100% absolutely worth fighting, and God calls you to fighting this war. He calls you to fighting this battle. All right, before we close in prayer, I do want to mention some of you guys that super chatted and did a couple of super stickers. You guys are incredibly awesome. Brandy, Showalter, thank you. You said we need to pray for them to see the wrongness in their ways, for the Lord is so good. Amen to that. It'd be a miracle if somebody like the butcher of Tehran actually turned from his wicked ways. But of course, we want to pray for those things. John and Roger, thank you. Viking loves Jesus. I love you guys. Did you see me hold up the Bible you guys bought me? The Bible will never leave this studio. It's very dear to my heart. All right, let's close in prayer, and then we'll jump on to locals in about 5 minutes. You guys are going to love what we do on locals. I'm going to show you guys a few things that the rest of the world will eventually see, but it won't be for a little while. So we're going to do that. Let's pray. Ask the Lord to go before us. Father, we thank you, Lord, for this time. Thank you for these, your people that have gathered here today in your name. What a group of amazing people, Lord, that love you. And I thank you for them, Lord. I pray that you would use them and build them up and encourage them and minister to them, Lord. Change their minds and their hearts. Continue, Lord, to change the minds and the hearts of these that have hardened their hearts. Give these people that are watching right now boldness and wisdom and understanding and discernment, Lord, to act the way you've called them to. We love you, God, and thank you. And we ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, I love you. Don't forget, Edo Netanyahu. That's going to be a great interview. That's Friday coming up. We got some great stuff planned for you tomorrow. I've got one heck of a show that we recorded with Monkey, dealing with a massive mistake that the Pope made. It was evil. We're going to talk about that, and it relates to Israel. Thursday, we've got the live show. Friday, we've got the Netanyahu show. We got a great weekend planned for you guys. So love you. Keep fighting the good fight. And we'll see you guys on Locals in just a few minutes. God bless you guys.